Hey, it's Cersei, and today I wanted to discuss two of the mental blocks that prevented me in the past from being willing to push higher keys like I'm willing to do now, and ways that I have worked through these mental blocks to allow myself to feel a greater sense of fulfillment when playing WoW. These blocks came from external pressures where it was not okay to care about playing WoW well. Sometimes it was not okay to be playing WoW at all, where you would hear comments about it being a waste of time, it's not contributing to your well-being. My sleeping habits still agree with that one. That playing the game is not going to be beneficial in any way. Most times referring financially, but sometimes meaning in an overall sense. This would even be true within the game at times, where if you were going to do something in the game, it had to appear effortless. If you failed, you were ridiculed, and then if you put in time publicly to improve and push through the failures, you would get ridiculed as well. While I am referring primarily to Mythic Plus with the in-game example, it is interesting thinking back how this applied also to Mythic rating, where it felt like the mentality was not an issue with us or our abilities, but one of familiarity, gear, or anything else we viewed as an external factor. When we would hit a wall, it would be that a mechanic was stupid or something was overtuned. When in reality, that might be true, but there was an opportunity for us to improve as well, which we did, but it was never talked about openly or accepted. This environment led to a mindset where it felt only appropriate to do Mythic Plus content that I knew I could complete with 99% likelihood. Or if we did fail as a group, that I would not be the one responsible for the failure. I would rarely do Mythic Plus keys at all, especially since I was able to get gear from Raid, so there was less of an external push to do keys. When I did do keys, I would only pick ones for which I was overgeared, rarely selecting 15s, which at the time were needed for the best loot. I did not feel confident dealing with every affix, and even once I did feel comfortable with the affixes, there would be this internal worry that I am going to make a mistake and be ridiculed for it, which was something that I wanted to avoid at all costs. This I all did in spite of the fact that I love a challenge. I love seeing how I can push myself. I went and did all 36 mage towers because I thought it would be a fun challenge. But I was only able to do that because nobody could see how many times I had to redo them, or that I did have to learn and grow. I would instead play it off as if it was second nature to be able to do them. I missed out on a lot during that point in WoW because of my internal fears of external judgment, and that I did not believe it was okay to care about becoming better at a game, which was seen by people in real life as a waste of time. And while yes, done in a friendly way, was joked about in-game by my guildmates. So I felt stuck. That's why I want to talk about these two mental blocks of fear of judgment and worry that you should not care about a game, and how I have grown past these mental blocks and how it has allowed myself to view my care about different aspects of WoW in a different light that I have applied to my life outside of WoW as well. Let's start with how I felt limited and how I could care due to how gaming was viewed in my real life, and how many activities can be viewed in a similar vein, where if it does not have a financial benefit or is not directly impactful to your life, it can be viewed as a waste of time and effort, and something that is keeping you from the important things in life. I won't deny that there can be some truth in those statements, especially when I was using WoW as escapism from other aspects of my life. Which is probably why when I heard those statements from other people, I felt the truth in it. As there are plenty of times where I did waste time and avoid working through my problems with WoW. And I think that's all it takes to take away from our care towards things that we enjoy, where if there are wrong reasons for why we are doing those activities, we feel that we are lying to ourselves. We know we are harming ourselves instead of helping ourselves. and I let the words hit towards those insecurities that I had, where there were many things that I wanted to do, but I was not in the best mental state, and WoW let me have fun, laugh, and free myself from my anxieties and depression that were growing as a young adult in my first few years of university. This is where I would stop myself from caring about the game, as the line became blurred between myself genuinely having fun and challenging myself in WoW and escaping from reality using WoW. And I was no longer able to distinguish between the two. And today I can say I can clearly see that divide. It was not clear what the positives were towards my life that came from gaming, which have become more clear as I've gotten older. In addition to that, these were comments coming from my family and those older than myself, who had lived more, who I had trusted to help guide me through life. So it made it difficult to go against what was being told to me, that it was better to not care. However, there was always something that brought me back to playing WoW. Sometimes, yes, for the wrong reasons, but there was always an internal pull towards the game and challenging the hardest content. And as I've gotten older, and I've learned more about growth, development, and becoming the person I want to be, I became determined to understand this internal pull and how it mattered in my life. That led to the question of, what is it I actually care about when I'm playing WoW? Why does it matter, and why do these comments specifically affect my willingness to challenge group content like Mythic Plus? As I've thought about it and contemplated this question, I found there were many positive reasons that I had for playing WoW. It was a great way for myself to relax, and I love working together with a team towards a greater goal. But all of these did not feel affected or limited by the comments made from those around me. However, when it came to Mythic Plus, I thought about my internal state and understood that I wasn't sure if it was appropriate to put in effort to improve, to care about improving my abilities at a game. I was at a level where I did not need to spend focused time improving at being a low to mid-tier Mythic Raider or relaxing while playing, but in order to challenge higher levels of Mythic Plus, I did not have the same confidence in my skills. This is where these comments hit the hardest, where why should I care to improve my skills at a game that does not matter at all? Why should I spend time and effort improving where there could be other things I could do? Now, not to get too existential, but to paraphrase Nietzsche, nothing matters, and it is ourselves who give meaning to our actions. And it was this mentality that let me start to reframe gaming and WoW to be something that I could make meaningful. There's a large mental block that I am working on currently of challenging my limits, being okay with failing and not being competent, pushing through difficulties and breaking my perfectionist mentality, where I cannot allow others to see my struggles, where I have to put up a front of everything comes easy or naturally. This is where I found meaning in caring about Mythic Plus and having it be a tool to work through these issues in a low-stakes environment, as change is difficult enough to begin with, let alone when you add higher consequences for failure. Thinking back, I believe this is also what my body was trying to do when it would push me to try a higher level of Mythic Plus, where I internally wanted to challenge my limits, but I had these mental blocks, and with the external pressure, I allowed myself to say it doesn't matter, so why should I bother changing and growing? Now I'm saying, how could I not care about pushing myself in WoW? I'm using Mythic Plus to discover more about myself and who I want to be, and bring about internal change through my gameplay. I want to be the person who sees a challenge and wants to see how I compare to it, find my limit, and then decide if it's something that I want to surpass. I want to be that person who constantly surpasses my limit in everything that I do and be willing to put my all into it regardless of outside expectations and pressures. This is why Mythic Plus matters to me and why I care about pushing myself in WoW. A game that, on the outside, can look like it has zero impact on my life. Something that is only used for leisure, something that can be talked about as a regret later in life as time wasted, and not to be looked back upon fondly. To that I argue that only becomes the reality when we use gaming in a way that is detrimental to ourselves. And I've used it as a way to distract myself from working through problems, and I did for a long time. So I'm well aware of how it can negatively impact someone's life if we let other aspects of ourselves degrade as we escape. But when we can turn gaming into something meaningful that pushes us forward, it becomes something so integral to who we are. I still feel my insecurities working against me at times where I feel nervous and anxious to sign up for a Mythic Plus key at a level that I have not previously completed, or even during a dungeon where I don't feel as confident. But I take this nervousness as the fact that I care, and it reminds me that I am going to grow by pushing through this nervousness and giving it my best effort. Pushing through requires me to accept there's a chance that I caused the key to fail because of mistakes, or that I currently just am not skilled enough to complete that level, which I personally find difficult to push through most of the time. But with this reframing of using WoW and Mythic Plus as a tool to push through my own internal struggles so I can be the person I want to be, it becomes so much easier. This leads me into my next mental block that made and makes it difficult to want to put in effort and care towards progressing Mythic Plus keys, of that social pressure that I felt and feel from other guildmates and players at the time, where it was not cool to put in effort towards things. Everything you did had to seem mostly effortless. And while we would progress together as a group for raiding, and we would run into walls, we were not the issue. Where familiarity I would now classify as an us issue, it was viewed as outside of ourselves, or at least that is how I saw the situation. However, when it was individual people making mistakes, it was something to poke fun at. And while it was primarily meant in a lighthearted way, I had other issues to work through, like my outwardly perfect persona that I sought to maintain, that made me terrified of making mistakes and becoming the butt of the jokes. And it made me wary to join content where I could make mistakes or cause issues because of my skill level. In raids, I just hoped not to be the first person to make a mistake. Or if I did make a clear mistake, I would hope that we either killed the boss so it'd be forgotten, or that someone else would make a larger mistake. I never wanted to be the person with the lowest skill level in the group, and I knew that it was possible in Mythic Plus to be the person the least familiar and least capable of performing well, especially if I ever tried to progress into higher keys where I did not have the experience. This all came together to make it easier to not care about my performance, so I could more easily joke off mistakes, where internally it really mattered to me, but it was easier to not care so I could avoid content that would be challenging, like high Mythic Plus keys where you may not complete it on the first try. The only content I was willing to challenge that I would need to repeat multiple times were Mage Towers, a completely solo experience, or in Battle for Azeroth, I would challenge myself to do low Mythic Plus keys solo, when I outgeared them heavily and see how high I could push as a single person team. in this scenario, I don't have to worry about anybody seeing how many tries it takes, but I got to have a fun little reward to talk about at the end. But I had to hide all the progress I made and the amount of work I spent learning about my class to be able to do it solo, as there were mechanics that required different things, where it was easier in a group and you had to figure out how to do it yourself. Since that time, I have learned strategies to push past these anxieties and am working to move past them altogether. But I understand it will be a process and something that I will struggle with at times at varying levels. The first strategy that I've used to work past this social pressure is to spend time learning about myself and who I want to be and what's important to me. By understanding that I want to use WoW Mythic Plus as a tool for changing my mentality to be further towards a growth mindset, it makes it easier to feel secure in caring about it. I become secure in myself and my actions, and it is easier to deal with criticisms that are going to occur from others that I play with, as this content cannot be done solo at the highest level, and learning to work together is a skill that is necessary. We've all seen it and we've all had to deal with it. When we get targeted in a group for a mistake we've made, or sometimes we are targeted and we're not even sure what we did wrong. And it can be difficult to deal with. It can make us no longer want to play, or at least not play with that person. So how do we deal with the criticisms we face during a run when we truly allow ourselves to care about the run? For this, I go to a common teaching point that I use when coaching, that we need to focus in on what we can control and leave out what is outside of that circle of control. Other people's actions don't fall inside of something we can control. Even if we try to reason with them or explain what happened, they may continue to criticize or even go so far as to reach a level of verbal abuse. So that's where I need to have a separation of caring about the run and caring about the people in the run with me. In the most ideal scenario, they go hand in hand, but these situations require you to make that distinction, where what matters to me is improving during this run and hopefully completing the dungeon in time. But when this happens, it becomes easier to ignore it and focus on the things that I actually care about, where I look at how I can improve my performance at different choke points, improve my awareness of team positioning and enemy abilities, and finally improve my planning ability so I can understand when it is appropriate to use different cooldowns and when I should be saving them for an upcoming spike of damage. In those dungeons, my team coordination and team communication no longer becomes a focal point, as my care would be wasted in that environment and be potentially detrimental to my development and understanding of my limitations. This also makes it easier to move forward to the next dungeon, as I can reset more easily and open myself back up to improving those aspects of my abilities. If there are avenues for improving in team communication, whether that be discussing routes early on or making minor adjustments during the dungeon, or communicating when I need people to use cooldowns to help out defensively. The second way that I have grown to push through these social pressures to allow myself to care more easily is to understand what the intentions of the people are that put forward this social pressure to not care about things. When I think about a person that wants what's best for me and will support me, I think of someone who will encourage me to care as they trust that I'm doing it for the right reasons. And if I'm so committed to improving, why wouldn't they want to support that? And if they did have reservations about my commitment level, I believe they would approach it respectfully and from a place of genuine concern and care themselves. So if people I'm around regularly are not doing those things and instead putting me down, it makes me question whether they care about me personally, which makes it easier, if they do not care about me, to not care about their opinions on the things I do. When looking at the environment where most people are strangers, which is the reality for Mythic Plus most of the time, where you are joining random groups and won't be familiar with most of the people. I start with the mentality that everyone is sharing in the same mentality that I am, where they also care at a minimum about completing the key in time, and hopefully also care about improving their own personal ability. So when criticisms are mentioned, even when bluntly, I first reflect on if I felt that I had made a mistake, and if I did, accept it, say my bad, and move forward. If I don't feel that I made a mistake or something else caused their criticism, I either just leave it be as something to reflect on after the dungeon, or share my perspective respectfully and then leave it and move on. We have a dungeon to clear. If at that point they become focused on pointing out every little mistake or won't let that mistake go, then I understand that their priorities have changed. And the dungeon is no longer their number one priority. They care about pointing out mistakes in some cases, or in some cases they care about creating a false sense of superiority. This is where I know that they do not have good intentions towards me, and so why should I be giving any weight to the opinion of someone who I barely know and does not want the best for me, or whose goals don't align with my own? It was these realizations that made it possible to feel more secure in myself and deal with social pressures much easier. Where since I know who I am, I don't need to determine my own self-worth by others' opinions of me. It was an issue I had to deal with a lot, where I would determine my self-worth from my guildmates, or sometimes I needed validation from random people in a dungeon group. Nowadays, though, it does feel nice when people enjoy dungeoning with me and when they mention it. But if they don't, or they tell me to screw off and never dungeon again, I know that I want to and that I care about Mythic Plus. So I'm going to continue, just not with them. And that I'm going to try to grow and get better, and that my own opinion of myself, what I value and what I care about, is the most important. And I would value myself less if I let myself be swayed by such an opinion, or take away this tool that I'm using to push through some difficult internal challenges. I'm not going to say it's easy, and I also still sometimes become upset, especially when I do make mistakes and cost everyone a run. But I differentiate better now that the reason I feel bad is not because of what they are saying, but because I did not meet the standards to which I strived. So I can focus more on the real feeling instead of interpreting it as I care about what others are saying. All of this I talk about to tell you, it's okay to care. Whether that be about Mythic Plus, WoW in general, or anything else in your life, it's okay to care. Take the time to discover what it is about that activity that is meaningful to you, and then give it everything that you can to pursue that meaning. Life's meaning comes from the meaning we give to it. So if you have something you want to discover about yourself, and you find a way to make that happen, trust that and give your full effort towards it. Find out where that thread ends. I do caution towards ensuring you are doing that activity for the right reasons and not as a crutch to avoid working through other issues in your life. Most likely, there is a great reason that you do care about that activity. So let that shine through. Don't cover it in anxieties and escapism, as that's when I feel you begin to hate the things you love. If I continued playing WoW in the same way with the same state of mind, the internal turmoil would grow where I'd want to challenge myself, but my anxieties and fears would be too much to ever get fulfillment out of it. When you care about an activity and you want to put yourself into it, not to be too cliche, repeating it backwards, you begin to discover yourself in that activity. And that, at least for me, feels incredibly fulfilling regardless of any external response. And isn't that something we all desire? That feeling to feel fulfilled in life? So care. Care about the things you do in life, Let them be important to you and mean something towards who you and only you want to be. It's changed the way I've interacted with World of Warcraft, and I very rarely now feel myself slipping into using it as escapism. Bring about a more positive relationship with it for myself, where I feel excited when I do get to play, and I play fewer hours overall, but those hours I do play feel way more meaningful and impactful for myself personally. This mentality that I've been working on through Mythic Plus and WoW, a game that can be seen as a waste of time, I've seen becoming a factor in my life outside of WoW as well. The videos I've done over this past week, I think, have been the greatest example of that mentality. For the longest time, I've been fearful of the external judgment, and if those closest to me would not agree with this choice. If I would be mocked, ridiculed, turned into a joke, that my efforts would feel completely wasted. And you know, all of those things could happen. But I've discovered why I care about making these videos, and just the fact of making it makes it meaningful to me, in spite of if any of that happens. Will it still not for the moment feel not great? Absolutely. But I'm still happy I made this video. I truly hope that some of what I've talked about and the discoveries I've made in understanding myself can be beneficial to you in some way. Hopefully allowing you to allow yourself to enjoy activities more completely, and if you are already allowing yourself to feel fully internally fulfilled in what you do, keep being you. That is awesome. Going forward, I think I'm going to continue this format of talking about self-development topics that I use while playing WoW in some way or another, and how I try to apply that development to other aspects of my life in a more general sense. So, once again, I really hope that you got something out of this video, especially if you made it to this point. You are a trooper. If you have any stories related to any of the topics I discussed, I would love to hear, whether they be positive stories of change and growth, or stories of difficulties you have faced. Thank you once again for hanging around to this point in the video. And I hope you have a wonderful day watching the end of this Cinderbrew Meadery 14. Bye.